I do want to invite our next panelists to the stage. I believe they're being mic'd up, but they are ready. So our next panel around the role of deep tech innovation in creating prosperity in global growth markets will be moderated by a very dear and close friend of mine, Dr. Adam Sharkawy, founder and general partner at Material Impact. Our amazing panelists are Alicia Chong Rodriguez, a Legatum Fellow and CEO of Lumertech, Mr. Marwan Hassoun, Director of Partnerships at MIT, Iheb Triki, who's traveled a long way to be with us, co-founder and CEO of Kumulus, Jay Kothari, Head of Product Management, Google Design Platform at Google, and Reed Sturtevant, General Partner at Engine Ventures. Thank you. Adam, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I need to face these esteemed panelists.
But we should all turn our chairs a little to the right.
As long as I can see you guys. You know the expression sometimes one speaker is hard to follow? Well, lunch is very hard to follow, I got to tell you, because our job now is going to be to wake you guys up and re-energize you after the meal. All right. So let me maybe make a few opening comments, and then I'm going to go silent and let the experts on the panel do all the value add on this panel. But prosperity. Prosperity is a word that has been integrated into many facets of the day-to-day. And I think it's safe to state that it's hard to have prosperity without having the most basic needs to humankind be accessible, whether those pertain to clean air, to water, to affordable energy, to food, to healthcare. So let's just talk a little bit about some of the current challenges in what we're calling the growth markets to some of these most basic needs to humankind, and use that as a backdrop to the rest of the conversation. Land. More than 3/4 of Earth's land has been modified in some fashion. Resource distribution. 85% of the Earth's population lives in what we're calling the growth markets, and those markets will comprise almost all the growth for the coming 20 years. Food. Changing weather patterns will decrease agricultural land in Africa and Southeast Asia by 25% over the next 5 to 10 years. I'm not talking long term here. Water. Demand is increasing by 30%, or expected to increase by 30% by 2050, while supply changes in reverse. Healthcare. We have an inadequate infrastructure that will require workarounds, will require more decentralized and patient-empowered solutions. Economics. More than 1/3 of Africa is living below the extreme poverty line. And all the while, we have the backdrop of sustainability. And I'm not very pleased to announce that about half of the UN's Sustainability Development Goals, or SDGs, that are intended to be mandated by 2030 are already off target. That's the backdrop that we have to discuss today. So we have however, the pleasure of introducing a panel that is working on all facets of these problems. And it's really my pleasure to moderate this discussion. I'm going to make an assertion to kick it off. These kinds of problems will likely not be solved by the next social media app or the next really cool consumer gadget. They will likely be solved by deep tech. So let us kick it off from there. I'd love to get our panel's opinions on what is deep tech anyway. Maybe we can answer from two perspectives. Deep tech from the perspective of, in its most general sense, and deep tech from the perspective of these growth markets and what it means to them. And I think you may have an interesting divergence of thought there. So, Marwan, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna hold off. Reed, I'm gonna start with you if you don't mind. Reed, tell us your. How would you define, in your terms, deep tech, given that you're with the engine and they're working on solutions that are oriented and steeped in deep tech?
Sure, I can give it a shot, at least from our perspective. I'm with the engine. MIT put us in business 7 years ago to invest into and support deep tech companies that are taking science and engineering out of research labs and trying to commercialize it at scale. Every single day, the people that I work with at the engine are working primarily on physical, what Nicholas Negroponte, one of the co-founders of the Media Lab, would talk about, atoms versus bits. If you add electrons, then the atoms and electrons are kind of the world that I live in, and that gives us a span to help companies work on problems ranging from energy, production, storage, transmission, decarbonization of commodities like cement and steel, tissue manufacturing for regenerative medicine, some basic semiconductor optics and photonics technology. So huge span of technologies intending to solve really difficult problems and in the fullness of time create a world of abundance and equity. So it's a very science and engineering based in support of many world positive missions.
Thank you, Reed. Let me also turn it over to Jay, who, from a different angle, is steeped in many things deep tech. Jay, how would you define deep tech and your involvement in it?
So I think a few things come to mind. One of the first thing that comes to mind is it's something that almost transparently solves a big problem that users face. And we were talking about the blueprint. It even sounds a little cliche, but we talk about finding a problem that billions of people are impacted by, and then finding some sort of sci-fi technology. We quite literally reference sci-fi regularly, and then saying, what's the investment that we need to make that happen? And that investment consistently is that deep tech, whether it's reduction in sensor size or finding new means of carbon capture, or finding new ways of human-computer interaction. So that's a large part of our investment strategies that we do. For me, in my day-to-day, the transparency bit is really important. So where a technology actually is solving the problem that couldn't be solved before, but it isn't in the front and center. So today, when we talk about things like ChatGPT, while it's a foundational tech, it is not transparent to the user. It is, I'm talking directly to an AI versus I'm working on something and an AI is assisting me along the way. So to me, again, personal bias on the latter, the transparency of making it easier for us to solve specific problems, interact with that technology, enable things that we couldn't before. So for example, we recently completed an investment in internet infrastructure, where today, if you want to run a mile of fiber, it costs on the order of $10 to $20 million. What if you could just set up 2 laser beams, one going one direction to the other, and you get the same for 10,000? We are doing that. That is a foundational tech where you are able to do communication via laser. It's not solving a net new problem. It is a foundational infrastructure problem, but this technology is enabling of it without the cost, without the time. Like, this is, How long does it take to put 2 poles in the ground and put a receiver and a laser? And now you have the equivalent of backbone infrastructure. So how can you do that in different places? That's how I see it.
Thank you, Jay. I'm going to turn it over now to 3 of our panelists who I would say are steeped in more of the in situ, what I would call in situ deep tech innovations that are happening in growth markets and are also involved in bridging kind of the more established markets to the more emerging markets. Let me start with you, Marwan. Would love to get your definition.
Okay, so I think I'm going to diverge a little bit from the definitions of my colleagues without contradicting them. I'm actually going to pose a couple of questions to answer the question. First, is there a global definition for what deep tech is? And the second question I want to ask, should there be a global definition of what deep tech is? And I'm going to postulate that the answer is no. I think it's going to depend on economics. It's going to depend on geography. It's going to depend on the availability of resources. It's going to be dependent on the availability of education. It's going to depend on the availability of entrepreneurs. And it's not even the short-term availability of these different aspects, but rather the long-term availability of these aspects. So I think it would be terribly unfair to have the same definition for a country, I will mention Botswana for obvious reasons, of 2.3 million people versus a country like the United States that has 350 million people. The scale of the problems are different, and the solutions might be different. That does not mean that the solutions can have an overlap. What I personally don't want deep tech to mean is a high bar or something that has to be imported from one geography to another, but rather something that needs to be developed collectively. So I'm going to stop at that. That's my thoughts on deep tech.
Well, thank you, Marwan. Those are insightful comments. And let me turn it over to you, Iheb, because you're working on one of the most fundamental needs of humankind, access and democratization of access of water. And you're doing it within the confines of these growth markets. Tell me more about how you think about deep tech.
Deep tech. If you allow me 2 steps back, so there is Google, MIT there, but Kumulus, I think not a lot of people know Kumulus. So we're a company between France and Tunisia. We developed a concept to create water from air, drinking water from air. And the second step is we're in an impact panel, and my wish is to replace those ugly plastic bottles with les gourdes. So let's avoid having them in those panels. Now, my definition is very simplistic when it comes to deep tech. Deep tech, for me, it comes against fast tech. Fast tech is something that we can build in 2 to 3 months and put it in front of the customer. Deep tech, for me, is something that would take 12, 18, 36 months to develop. And maybe we can project this to the definition of TRL, technology readiness level. So the earlier you are, the deeper in the tech you are. Maybe it's simplistic, but this is how I see things.
Thank you, Iheb. Let me call upon Alicia for a second. Alicia, you're working on a very interesting in an interesting space where not only is it extremely important in terms of basic human access to healthcare, needing to be more decentralized, but you're arguably working in an area that is called or a part of underrepresented healthcare, though it really is most of the people in the world, women. Alicia is spearheading a women's health company, and it's crazy that sometimes women's health is categorized as a underrepresented minority group. It's crazy, right? So, Alicia, from that angle, tell us more about how you view it.
Yes, no, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I can't explain how happy I am to see this community, but nervous to go after all of these guys talking about deep tech, to share my perspective on deep tech. I think one of the biggest things when we started looking at the problems and looking at some of the biggest challenges humanity is facing today, including the fact that women are often underrepresented in several areas, including healthcare. And when we saw that heart disease is the leading cause of death and disability worldwide, and today it is still 7 times harder to recognize, diagnose, and treat women with heart disease compared to men, and they're having worse outcomes. This is a huge problem, and where my definition of deep tech comes is the fact that we have over 30 years of evidence showing sex differences. We understand the science behind why there are disparities in the healthcare system. Most of the clinical trials have been done using, and medical devices and therapies have been created using mostly data from male animals and men. So even as we go into this era of artificial intelligence and all of the data is predominantly male, we can see how this problem can perpetuate. And I think deep tech comes from a place where if we know that there's science behind and we can do change and implement cutting edge technologies to make a change in this area, there is a huge opportunity to tackle some of the hardest challenges and change the way that we provide healthcare around the world. And that's why we're going after personalized diagnostics and focusing on women's health.
Thank you, Alicia. Well, look, I started by saying that lunch is a hard act to follow. I hope that you're as inspired as I am by this group of panelists who are working on some of the largest problems that we have to humankind. And I can assure you from my interactions, brief and longer, that we are in good hands with the entrepreneurs like this at the helm. Let me switch gears a little bit and talk about, or ask you to talk about, the challenges and what it means to apply deep tech to these critical problems. Why deep tech? Why is deep tech important from the context of the individual problems that you guys are trying to solve versus tech in general? What makes it deep? And let me come back to you, Iheb, because I know that you have a passion around this topic.
No, it's so we create water from air, and it's drinking water from air. And when it comes to drinking, it's not water for agriculture; it's for human bodies. And so the fast tech part of Kumulus is that we've been able to develop very quick technology that is aligned to the European Union norms when it comes to water. And we specified selected spots where we can apply our technology, because if the air is polluted, for example, you cannot ensure that the water is potable for human beings. But then the deep tech part is to make sure that this technology that we're deploying can be applied everywhere in the world where it's needed. And we're talking billions of people in that case. And this is the deep tech part. It's a project of R&D that we're deploying and that we're working on since 12 months ago, and that we hope that we find the solution in the next 12 months. It's how to make the water potable. It's how to add the minerals to make sure that we control them and that the taste is good. So I spoke about fast tech, deep tech, and now I'd like to add another element when it comes to our technology, which is legislation. Because you need to convince the French government, you need to convince the US government that at the end, your technology is always providing drinking water for populations. And this takes another layer of complexity when it comes to us. It's not tech, it's human complexities that you need to take into account. One of the strength points of Kumulus is that we're developing our technology with a solid foot in France, where you have one of the best laboratories when it comes to water, and a solid foot in Africa and Tunisia when it's North Africa. It's in North Africa. And this allows us to fast track some of the deployment of the machines, because in Tunisia, they are in dire stress. They don't have the luxury of having plastic bottles or having water at all. So they can accept to create a sandbox of regulation where they say, okay, we trust you. Instead of doing 18 months of test it right now. And this is the first strength. And the second, with the foot in the laboratories in France, is that you don't have to wait years to build that knowledge that those laboratories have. And you don't need a huge amount of fundings to use those laboratories' equipments. So Kumulus' strength is to apply Western technologies, Western know-how to solve problems that we live in Africa and North Africa. And maybe I'll fast forward in one of the elements we'll discuss. So to solve problems that Africa has today, but that the Western will have in the near future. We're talking water scarcity already in Spain, in Italy, in Florida, in California. So having Africa as a way to test those technologies and making them ready is also a big benefit for the West.
I want to underline a couple of points that Iheb just made. And I think it's really important for us all to really see it from that angle, because there are two very critical elements to what you mentioned. Number one is that in many ways, when we think about the quote-unquote growing, emerging, developing markets, and we think about them sometimes inadvertently as a step or two behind, the reality is, in the case that Iheb just mentioned, sometimes they're a step or two ahead, because entrepreneurs in the emerging markets have always been operating under anaerobic conditions. They are working on problems that may not necessarily be the kinds of problems that have manifested yet in the quote-unquote developed nations. So in many ways, they are actually a harbinger for what is yet to come. So I think that those are really important angles. So thank you for making those points ahead. Marwan, you are trying to create a bridge, and you have a passion around what I'm going to call again in situ development. Development, innovation from the source to the destination, as opposed to trying to just take Western-based innovation and transplant it into emerging markets. Tell us more about your experiences in doing that and some of the passions that you have in driving that.
I've got to set up where I'm coming from. I'm with MIT Sandbox. And MIT Sandbox is a grassroots program here at MIT. It's the underbelly of innovation and entrepreneurship, an entry point for any team that has an idea to come in and get their idea to grow, whether it's deep tech or not deep tech, but all kinds of ideas. And what we've done is, for the last 5 years, we've taken that program and we've taken it to Africa. We started with Morocco, 7 institutions there, where we're running about 150 startup teams coming out from that environment. So, and I'm just going to give a little example of a deep tech example of what happened with a team. So one of the early teams, they had a deep tech problem that had to do with cement building. They needed to, it required time and money and investment. I think there were a couple of PhDs and master's students. There were 5 team members in there and a professor. And they got themselves a pilot. And then we asked them, at some point, we introduced them to investors, help them with that, and said, well, how many of you are staying with the startup? I think you can guess how many said they are. 0. All of them were applying for academic jobs. Why? Why are they doing that? And the answer that we got is, and I'm adding more to it, is the lack of opportunity, the lack of examples, the lack of trust, the lack of confidence that if they go down that path, especially for a deep tech problem that's going to require time, that they're going to be able to get the funding, that they're going to be able to make a living, because that's important. It's not just giving back and solving a problem. The entrepreneurs have to make a living, right? They don't have to, a lot of them don't want to be filthy rich, but they do want to make a living doing something they love and they have a passion for. So I'm just using that as an example of things that need to be solved and need to be addressed. And the way I see it is that we need to continue in all over the world, but especially in developing economies and developing countries, is to create that trust at a grassroots level. So yes, we can go now, investors can go into the labs, the intelligence, the work that's being done at universities all over the world. You can go in and you can find a lab that's doing some meaningful hard tech, deep tech stuff, and you can fund them and maybe pay them enough even to go out of the lab and follow their passion. But what I'm interested in, what we're interested in, what we believe in, is the fact that we need to develop the future deep tech entrepreneurs that are not necessarily right now doing deep tech, but they have ideas and they want to be entrepreneurs. And that's what the program brings in. And I think we need to provide them with the confidence that as they go down their journey of maybe going or tackling more deep tech problems, that there will be opportunities for them to continue with it. And of course, they need to see the examples. So the bridge part is bringing that know-how across in one direction, but also in the other direction, bringing the definition of the problems, what the problems are, and even the tech that's in other countries in the other direction, because the problems and the solutions might be different, but there might be an overlap. But also, and I'll quit after that. But also, again, for smaller economies, a deep tech problem requires a lot of money and requires bigger markets. So they will need access also to bigger markets. So their deep tech that's going to, tens of millions of dollars that are going to be invested in have to have a bridge to global economies in order for that tech company to be successful. So I'll stop at that.
No, thank you, Marwan. I think it's interesting that we're starting to converge on this this characterization of deep tech, not just by definition of what it pertains to in terms of the kinds of technologies, but more importantly, the kinds of problems it's trying to solve, right? So I'm going to come back to that point in a second. Reed, let me ask you a question. Sometimes deep tech is also, synonymous with hard tech, and in the engine they often use the word tough tech. They're not hard tech just because it's hardware and hard solutions versus software. They're hard because they're hard, and it's tough, and it's difficult. One of the things that I can tell you from the material impact side is that out of our 32 portfolio companies and counting, all deep tech, not a one has the same business model as the other. It's unlike software, which is fairly algorithmic, unlike biotech, which is very algorithmic, if you think about it. You know exactly what the inflection points are. You know what you need to do to reach the next value inflection point. And your ability to commercialize is fairly well established. That is not the case with deep tech, I assure you. Everyone has to be customized towards the problem, the market, and the technology. Tell me more about how you perceive tough tech and why it's so tough.
Yeah, it's tough because it's hard and there's so much unknown ahead of you. It's tough because it often takes time. So at the Engine Ventures, we're a venture firm, but the funds have up to an 18-year fund life, which is quite unusual. I agree with you that the playbook for taking a certain technology to market successfully is sometimes counterintuitive and not like entrepreneurship is taught in business schools and campuses. For instance, we work with a company called Sublime, technology out of MIT for carbon neutral cement production. There's no question of product market fit. Do people buy cement? Yeah, they buy a lot of cement. But there are questions about techno-economic. Can this new process compete on price? There's questions about regulation. You can't just sell people cement to build a skyscraper. It has it's a regulated market. So how are those regulations defined? And in the US, up until recently they were defined by actual chemical composition. It had to have a certain percentage of the clinkers, which are the byproduct of the kiln. That's now being changed, and it's regulated based on performance testing. But those playbooks are quite different than people may realize for each of the companies. We also like the word tough tech because it's hard, it's tough, but if you get it right, it's very durable. So.
Well, one of the comments you just made, one of the themes is that there has to be a clear value proposition, an economic value proposition. This is, by the way, what separates what we went through in what we called Clean Tech 1.0, right? Which a lot of investors still look back in the 90s and say we lost our shirts in that. And Deep Tech, which is maybe in part synonymous with Clean Tech 2.0, is that it's evolved now to ensure that from a value perspective, the economics work out. And it's driven by an economic value proposition first, and then it's clean and sustainable as well, which is a different mindset. It's not like Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. It has to be very laser focused. And so towards that end, it's hard. It takes an ecosystem that basically Iheb was talking about. It's not just about a market, a technology. It's got a lot of stakeholders, including legislation and government. It takes a lot of funding. So, so far we see challenge upon challenge upon challenge. Alicia, you graduated from MIT. You came from an environment where you could have just as easily gotten a job with insert large public electronics company, but you didn't. Why?
Well, I think some of the things that everyone is alluding to, building this ecosystem and being part of this ecosystem is a big reason why I think I am a result of opportunities, right? Like I am a Legatum fellow, and it was thanks to the ecosystem. I also received funding from Sandbox. I got a lot of exposure to the ecosystem here. Coming from Latin America, I think one of the biggest things is when my family saw me graduating from MIT, everyone was super proud. I was proud, of course. But at the same time, then I decided to build my own company. And I was asking them, hey, the first year is going to be tough. I need help. Can you help me? And they were like, but you can get a job anywhere, which is what you're saying. Why don't you just get a job? Like that, you graduate and get a job. That's what you should do. And I was like, no, but I really I have a support system here. I understand. I have role models because thanks to the ecosystem, I'm exposed to a lot of founders. I think I can do this. I think other people notice that I have that entrepreneurial itch faster than me, but they convinced me that I could. And being part of a fellowship also helps you understand that for a whole year, like you see examples and that you can do this. And I'm like, they don't understand. My family doesn't understand. How do I pull this off? I think that first year I actually lived in the Legatum office for a long time and was part of many of the activities. And it was thanks to this ecosystem that I was able to get, I'm a result of opportunities. Many doors opened because I was here. And I think if I were in Costa Rica, to your point, would I have that exposure to this ecosystem? Probably not. Probably I would have ended up in the industry. And for me, it's very hard to kind of go back and say, okay, we need to build all of these opportunities. I also decided to go into deep tech, into solving one of the hardest challenges that no one has solved, right? Like, why is it that it's harder to diagnose women? Why is it that the healthcare system works the way it works? In terms of, like, in each country, we have different regulatory processes for healthcare. We're seeing the same issue. It takes longer to diagnose. It takes longer to treat. And there's a lot of things that you have to focus on while building this infrastructure of a company that is going to change and transform the way that we practice today diagnosing people. So I do think that if it weren't for role models and examples that I found along the way, including you, Adam, that I met you several years ago, I think we wouldn't be here. And it is a long-term process. 18 years sounds a lot, like a lot. I've been in this for 5 years now, and it's very exciting. I think every time, every step of the way that we unlock the next milestone and that we create our own path and our own journey, it gets even better. So it's really exciting to see how like this year has become the year that everyone is finally talking about women's health, right? Like the White House just put $100 million into our page and announced $12 billion of investment in women's health. We're seeing things that a few years ago, no one even talked about, right? So change is happening, and it's going to be an exciting next few years.
Well, you know, as an investor, I'm not supposed to have favorites amongst my investments, but I will tell you that for full disclosure, BloomerTech is one of my I'll speak in code. One of my favorites, and certainly it's because of the tenacity, the agility, the brilliance, and the hard work of Alicia, who, by the way, she's mentioned, but I'll double click, is a Legatum fellow. So as a product of this program. So we've spoken about different elements now of the criticality of deep tech, not just because of the technology that's deeply entrenched in sciences, but because of the kinds of depth of problems that they're trying to solve. We've talked about how complex it is from a funding, from a multiple stakeholders perspective. Let me now switch gears a little bit, because we've talked about a lot of the hard and tech elements of it. Jay, I want to turn it over to you. You come at this from a very different and interesting angle, because for all intents and purposes, you also probably spend a lot more time thinking about systems and kind of broader software platforms and so forth, given your experiences. We were shooting the breeze over coffee prior to this panel, and he mentioned something that was really intriguing to me, and I truly believe, which is, if you think about water didn't become a problem overnight, right? Neither did the food supply chain or healthcare. No, these have always been problems. Innovation isn't because we've just woken up and defined the need. Oh, it's a new need. It's not the case. What's really interesting is, how do you transform a problem to a different problem in the times that you can see it differently? And that is sometimes what becomes the basis of innovation. And you opened my eyes to that thinking, Jay. Tell me more about how you see that angle, because you were quite eloquent in the way you described it.
Thanks. I don't know if I was that eloquent, but I'll try. For anybody here who's studied math or computer science, there's a well-established problem called reduction. The idea that all problems can be reduced from one to the other, and if you can solve one, you can solve the other. Finding the fastest path somewhere, or finding the fastest way to find a number in a phone book, they're actually the same solve to some extent. So I think one of the things here for me has been, I've gotten to work on some really foundational deep tech stuff. I helped start Azure, led AWS, and there we didn't actually invent anything new, but we solved a significant problem. Data centers are data centers. Everybody knows how to build one. But managing a data center at scale, making it so that 70% of my time isn't put on keeping the lights on, like seriously. You look at majority of the companies that we do, web-based, software-based companies, they run on one of these cloud platforms. But prior to this, they were spending 70% of their time running their infrastructure and 30% running differentiated value. The stories for both of those platforms were not net new invention, but taking something from an existing problem and moving it forward to what we've done. Similarly, like we were working on a series of logistics problems, quite literally the logistics manufacturing industries. And we were looking at problems that a particular airplane manufacturer, we're not naming them now, they were having with building their planes. And it was particularly around how quickly and how efficiently with minimal problems and checking it that they could do. We took that same technology, which was incredibly valuable to them, and applied it to telemedicine. It's the exact same foundational technology. Now, specialists in Canada don't have to wait, or patients in Canada don't have to go to the big city, spend a month for a complex pregnancy. They can stay in their home, and they can use that same technology to get a physician who's a specialist, an OB specialist, to confer with their GP in their local area and do that. Same foundational technology that's used for building a plane, repairing power lines and phone lines, and delivering a baby. It's the exact same thing. No difference. Software is not different. It's identical. And we can do that. It's quite fascinating to see how we can take that technology and apply it to different domains. And one of the things that I work in product management, and a lot of us get excited by the technology itself. But technology without a problem to solve is a different beast altogether. And it's a really taxing one. So I come back to my teams usually and say, your technology choice is an implementation detail. What's the problem that you're falling in love with? What's the complexity that is opening your eyes? And what's the solution and impact you want to have? Don't tell me about the technology. That happens a lot. And it's an extreme statement, but it combats the I'm very much interested in the technology. It goes back to what Reid was saying, Marwan saying, you were saying around product market fit, right? Making sure that what you're building is useful for that solve.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment, and hopefully, product market fit is almost built into certain aspects of deep tech if it's originating from trying to solve a major problem as opposed to a cool technology that's being developed in the lab, and now let's try to find out where it fits. If we're really doing our work right, especially in the growth markets, usually the product market fit, we start with that and work backwards. So great comments. Let me turn it back around now and invite all of you to be speakers, to basically take an opportunity to ask questions, make comments. We have, again, a brilliant group of panelists that I think can add some insightful comments to your questions. So, Ronnie, if you could please moderate our Q&A session, that would be great. Any questions from the audience? Or any comments? Okay. Uh-oh. It's gonna be a tough one.
No. First of all, I love everyone on this panel and the moderator, so we can put that aside. I think the question that I have is really, the Legatum Center has really been pushing to see deep tech innovation really start taking root in global growth markets. And I know, for example, Iheb, you and I have had these conversations many times, and Alicia, you started your business here in an ecosystem that truly embraces deep tech. I'd love to hear maybe a thought from Iheb around what do we need to do to see in our countries deep tech innovation thrive? What needs to change within our ecosystems? Because I walk around sometimes, people will say, well, what is deep tech? You talk to investors and they'll say, we don't understand how to even invest in a company like that. So a lot of education needs to happen. And then I'd love for Jay to comment around, a big company like Google. What role can be played to really work bottom up to see more technology be applied at the bottom up level in countries across the global growth markets?
Go for it.
Please.
Yeah. You shouldn't have given her the mic.
I didn't do that. That was Dina.
It's a great question. I think, so I'll answer the question on what it takes for us in Tunisia, Egypt, or in Africa to develop deep tech. And then I'd like to speak as well on what I believe which can be the duty of an institution like MIT to assist our countries as well in this. So to sum it up, I think we need an ecosystem. An ecosystem is financial institutions who understand deep tech. To be honest, in North Africa, at least the ones that I've met, do not understand very well deep tech. The fact that they invest a big chunk of money and then wait 12 to 18 months with the risk of not getting the payback. It takes an ecosystem as well to have a government that is able to have the flexibility to create those sandboxes. It takes an ecosystem because here in MIT or in Stanford, you raise your hand and you find hundreds of brilliant students around you, which is not very easy. And it takes belief or self-belief in our strength, the capability of Africans to create to solve problems for the world, self-belief. And by self-belief, the self-belief comes with success stories that we should repeat. So maybe Kumulus is one of the companies that tried, but before us, there were companies like InstaDeep, which is one of the success stories in AI in North Africa, $500 million exit, one of the biggest exits aside from Egypt. We need more of those success stories. Now, the role that I think, or that I wish institutions like MIT can play is, and I think Marwan mentioned it, it's how you can bring this mindset that we have here in Cambridge to our regions. Bringing this mindset and showing them that, yes, you can succeed. Yes, you can pour a lot of money and then find it. And yes, believe in yourself that you're solving a problem for Africa today, but it's a problem that you'll be solving for Europe and the US. There is a role as well by building bridges. Kumulus was able to build the bridge between Tunisia and France. For us, we hope that we can build a bridge in terms of laboratories between Tunisia and MIT. That's a strong thing. And the third element, it's investors like yourself, for example, which can have a pocket of investment for deep tech startups in Africa. DFIs, you can find the money from DFIs as an LP, but it's your know-how on finding those startups. And it's your know-how on making those startups, on mentoring them. You were mentioning earlier the milestones. You know them. You can draw them. I can assure you that hundreds of the startups and founders in Africa do not have this mindset. So if you're capable of bringing this know-how, you will help them succeed.
That's a great response. Thank you, Iheb. Jay, I think you were also maybe requested to comment on what can Google do?
So I think today, all the big tech companies have had a long realization over the last 5 to 10 years that the next billion users are going to come from growth markets. It is a no-brainer. We need to go there. I think what we've been doing is not just making sure that our products fit for that geography, that economy, but making sure that we actually establish centers of excellence in those places. So, for example, we have we call it Next Billion Users, and large parts of Africa are a part of it. We are establishing offices there to make sure that we actually cultivate technologists. We create full-on businesses for ourselves that can be invested in. There's education programs, et cetera. I think that's a consistent thing that you're seeing from the likes of the big tech companies. The other thing, I think it's more for the fellows here and others here, is that most of these big companies recognize industry pillars. So whatever industry you're working in, there are resources, there are people who are eager to help. Reach out to them. Don't be shy. Nerds love big problems. I promise you these companies are filled with lots of nerds, so they will be happy to engage. Find people, knock on their door. They will not turn you away. They will be excited. Despite what big companies' perceptions are that we're going after certain things in a certain way, it is very much the people within these companies are eager to play and try to solve these problems very clearly. So don't be shy, be aggressive, go after them.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yes, over here.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, guys. My name is Aubrey. I'm from Botswana. And I didn't know anything about deep tech until today. And I want to just say thank you guys to all the panelists. Your stories have been so immensely inspiring and such beautiful journeys and perspectives to hear. But I want to kind of hone in a little bit about the entrepreneur journey. You know, there's a moment where an entrepreneur has an idea and it's in the head. You get it when you're in the bathroom or on your walk or whatever. But then there is the idea actualization. When does that, like, that process, how is it for everybody? Because I believe it's very different, but there has to be some sort of commonalities in terms of like the process of idea pitching, right? What are some of the hurdles that you've experienced? Say, for example, Alicia, your story was so inspiring. Just hearing, people saying, "Oh, you just graduated from MIT. Why are you not getting a job?" So what are some of the hurdles you experienced or have experienced in idea pitching, and like how have you overcome them? That's what I'm really curious about. I'm not a Legatum fellow, but I'm a huge admirer, and yeah. It's never too late, exactly.
That's a great question, and if you don't mind, Alicia, let me turn it over to you because you've been in that on that journey for a while. I'd love to get your comments.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest hurdles to overcome personally was learning how to public speak, and it's still a process every time. Every time, 5 minutes before, I was like looking at the other panelists. They're not nervous. I'm nervous. Because this has been a process. To pitch your idea, you have to be good at communicating your idea. And again, like when I am in a one-on-one meeting, great. I think if I can click, even though we're from different cultures, different backgrounds, but we can have a good conversation, I will deliver and communicate eventually. Maybe my choice of words at the beginning, I will be nervous and I won't choose the right words, but eventually I communicate. But in these presentations, in these opportunities, which are huge opportunities that open more doors, because meeting people is very important to get doors to open and be able to share with the right person that will understand your idea to get it from idea to making it happen. I think communicating was a big part is a big part of this journey, because I'm still trying to get better every time. I think one of the advice that I got early on, Adam, and I think it was you actually, that told me, like, don't try to sound like others, because I was seeing some of the entrepreneurs here, they all sound the same. They have like a very they have phrases. I started writing my dictionary of entrepreneur dictionary, because they're like cutting the meeting short, like I have 5 minutes now, like I have to leave, and like very fast-paced, the way they spoke, very, very similar to each other, and I'm like, I'm not like that. And I don't know if I can be like that. And Adam, I think you were telling me, like, just talk, like speak with your heart, why you care about this, try to communicate with the person, because I also cannot say the same thing twice. If I already told you what my company is, the next time I talk to you, I'm not going to pitch exactly the same to you, because I can't. I already know you know my story, so I'm going to say something different. Some people can just repeat and repeat and repeat very good. So I think that's part of the journey, and eventually you meet the right people that can help you, that can expand you, that can introduce you to the right team members, right? Because I think a lot of it comes with the team and who you get on board to support making this dream a reality. And I am very grateful for everyone that has supported me.
Adam, can I make a quick comment on that? So what's really important for that, and I'm going to go a level down from where Alicia is, or where Alicia even started at Legatum, is to create a very safe environment for people to pitch their idea where they're not judged. If you want young entrepreneurs or young people to be able to speak their idea and have reduce the nervousness, able to articulate, you've got to create an environment for them to be able to do it without being judged. Not every pitch needs to be a place where they're being judged, their ideas, how they're pitching, but rather a safe place where they can get positive feedback. And whether it's Sandbox or our program in Morocco, that is one of the pillars that we create. The mentors are industry leaders from the US and from Africa and from Europe, and they sit with these teams in a non-judgmental environment, and we ask them to do it again and again, and we ask them to trust us in order for them to do that. So it's a grassroots way of developing it from the grounds up. There's plenty of advice on the higher level, when you want to pitch to investors, when you've already been selected as a Legatum fellow, you have that, but it's creating an environment where anybody with an idea can have that safe environment to pitch in and to learn how to pitch.
And to your point, you build that relationship with someone that you feel that can tell you anything and strengthen you. And then when you get judged, because you will get judged, and people will criticize you. And like I've spoken early days with cardiologists, like, why only for women? And then like there's this huge group of women in cardiology that like are at the forefront of this movement. And so you, depending on who you talk to, you could get bad advice. But I think having these type of people that you trust and you can go, hey, I heard this, what do you think? And you can either pivot or strengthen, right? But you have that source of comfort, or I don't know what the right word is, but like of non-judgmental people that you trust. I think that is super important, what you mentioned.
I will say, oh, yeah, we have a question? Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I think I have been, I come from Indonesia. I think Rizky just now mentioned. I think we are very grateful for MIT because I think, I was here with Alan White and David here. We have been collaborating for a few decades now, two and a half decades with MIT, and we work on the leadership program ideas. And I think coming here, and working with Indonesia and with China very early on, with Tsinghua University, with Fudan and others, when it was early stage of the development of these growth markets. And I think today's success in Indonesia, I have to say a lot has to do with what MIT has done. So coming here to learn about Legatum and how you work with the growth markets in Africa and other places, I think it's very, testament to the vision of the school to, grow with the world in the developing part of the world too. And I think from you, Adam, you started, you also mentioned about the SDGs. And I think in Bali, actually our campus, UID is in Bali, and we actually have collaboration with UN on a university's network for SDGs. And one of our fellows, our Ideas Fellows, is actually working in the government on SDGs. And Indonesia has actually it's not on track, but it's 60% on track compared to many countries who are 30%, I think, overall. So Indonesia has actually done quite a lot in supporting the SDGs. And on blended finance, they are also leading, working actually with other countries now. We are starting up a new international organization on blended finance in May with founding members, and it will be quite a lot of African countries joining. And the last part, I think, on education, finance, and technology. So on the technologies, Satya Nadella is in Bali and in Indonesia, and has announced a 1.7 billion investments on AI and cloud infrastructure. Tim Cook was just in Indonesia and also announced big in research, including in Bali, set up research base. So Indonesia is actually trying to work with the developing country. It was supported by the G20 leaders for this new international organization. So from, you are working in the deep tech space. I think if we want to solve the SDGs, I think we need to come of a place where there is a spirit that is, I I think that our president called it the triple happiness, Trihita Karana. The Balinese believe harmony of people with people, people with nature, and people with the spiritual. You need a place also and connect to the indigenous communities around the world who are also representing these priorities. So we're actually, as we talk today, there's a conference going on with some of the MIT faculty there at Crawley and others. So how do we create a learnings for the future that supports also this approach of future knowledge to really bring happiness through harmony, building trust, and all these aspects. So we're trying to find that space, and I would love to, I think, see more how with all of you here we could look at the future of us connected together to solve these problems. Thank you.
Well, that's, if I may, rather than pose that as a question, I know we're out of time, I think that's a wonderful way to close out the session. You've basically depicted the holistic nature of deep tech solving the world's most important problems, which I think we've mentioned aren't going to be solved by social media apps or electronic gizmos. So I think you've summarized it actually beautifully. So towards that end, I want to just take an opportunity to thank this wonderful panel. I will just maybe extract one thing that Alicia said for all of those budding entrepreneurs in this room. And by the way, Alicia's being way too modest. She was actually on TED giving a TED talk, so I don't know what she's talking about when she's referring to public speaking, but she's a master. But it's not about, when you're pitching for all of those in the room, it's not about pitching from the mindset of being polished, being overly articulate. It's about authenticity. It's about passion. You don't have to worry about grammar and word choice, because I'll just put it this way: passion speaks 100 languages. All right. Thank you very much.